Oh, that game? Yeah, I know it. It won't take long for me to remember. I've been playing it regularly. Did you know there are 3 kinds of Ace Combat games? Those with a gameplay focus, those with a story focus, and those with a mix of the two. Those are the 3. And that one? That is a true Ace Combat game. 18 years ago, there was a fictional war that engulfed the world, the Belkan War. And in that war, on that disc more directly, was a game that concluded a holy trinity. It was a video game that sparked many feelings from those who played it. Fear, admiration, awe, accomplishment, sadness, shock, you name it, this Ace Combat game probably had someone feel that emotion. And so, with the words of yours truly, Thunderous Fulf, the curtain rises.
It was a cold and snowy day.
The Ace Combat series had been on a roll in the early to mid-2000s. At that time, what would go on to be called the Holy Trinity by fans of this franchise was in full swing. 2001's Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies, also known as Ace Combat Distant Thunder in Europe, was the first in this trilogy. Having players take to the skies as Mobius 1, Ace Combat 4 gave people the ability to be an ace pilot while also teaching them about honor and chivalry in the midst of war. Ace Combat 4 would change the course of the Ace Combat series forever. 2004's Ace Combat 5 The Unsung War, also known as Ace Combat Squadron Leader in Europe, explored the idea of leading a squadron of pilots that you would have a chance to bond with. Tasking players with leading their squadron and nation to victory, Ace Combat 5 not only allowed players to once more be an ace pilot, but this game also taught some very harsh truths about war. And then, the third game in this holy trinity, featuring some of the best gameplay the series had seen up to this point, innovations in gameplay mechanics, a story that isn't afraid to tackle things like the dark sides of war and people's reasons for fighting, an amazing soundtrack to accompany all of this and more. This conclusion to the Holy Trinity would release all around the world in 2006, serving as the last Ace Combat game for the PlayStation 2. Ace Combat 0: The Belkan War. Also known in Europe as Ace Combat: The Belkan War, the game made a strong first impression to many. During the opening days and weeks of the game's launch, Ace Combat 0 quickly gained positive reviews left and right. However, after that initial wave of success, the game's momentum slowed down massively. Eventually, Ace Combat 0's sales would effectively grind to a halt. Nowadays, Zero serves as one of the lowest selling titles of the franchise. How could that be? One of the most well-known and loved Ace Combat titles somehow not even able to get over 800,000 sales officially? Unbelievable. Regardless of the numbers, that doesn't diminish the impact that Ace Combat 0 delivers to players, myself very much included. In fact, Zero has had so much of an impact and lasting impression on me that it's my favorite Ace Combat title. It's for that reason this retrospective has taken this long for me to make. I wanted to make sure I could do this game justice, that I could give this criminally undersold game the time and the spotlight it deserves. I also wanted to analyze why Ace Combat 0 is my favorite title to give myself a more definitive answer. Of course, I've had my general reasons why for all this time, but now that I'm making this retrospective, now's as good a time as any to get that deeper answer. After months of going back and forth with ideas and wondering about the different directions I could take this retrospective, I finally have my answer here. It's time for us to dive into the fireworks as the Demon Lord of the Round Table and explore what is, in my eyes, the peak of the Ace Combat series. By now, the Ace Combat series had established its footing in the video game market. After the culminating test that was Ace Combat 4, the developers had entered the era of experimenting with different approaches that revolve around the established gameplay of the franchise. For Ace Combat 5, the game decided to have its story be more front and center, along with giving players a chance to bond with their squad and learn some harsh truths to war in the midst of their aerial dominance. For Ace Combat 0, refinements and additions to gameplay was the main theme here. Naoto Maeda, the director of Zero, said that the game was, quote, a struggle between maintaining the spirit of the series while creating a unique gaming experience. This is a conundrum that all developers of series that are successful enough to warrant multiple entries have to face eventually. How do they keep the gameplay fresh while making sure it isn't too far of a deviation which could alienate longtime players? And this was something that Maeda, and most definitely the others as well, felt in full force during development, as, quote, the pressure of having to follow in the footsteps of the extremely well-crafted and successful Ace Combat 4 and 2005 was enormous. And Maeda wasn't kidding. Of course, it may seem obvious to us nowadays with the popularity that Ace Combat 4 and 5 have to this day, but back then, both of these games were getting very positive ratings across the board too. So to be faced with continuing this steadily building legacy is no easy task. The developers weren't one to back down from such a challenge though. It seems like they were able to dive into the fireworks and come out the other side completely unscathed. As Maeda said, quote, "There weren't really any instances where we failed. Actually, the project development schedule was so tight that we couldn't afford to make any mistakes. It was like running full speed across a 100-foot high tight wire." You know the saying, pressure makes diamonds? That seemed to be the case with Ace Combat Zero. Production on the game began sometime between October and December 2004, according to the Ace Combat wiki. Concept Zero was the first iteration of what would eventually become Ace Combat Zero. Originally having Phoenix as an interim protagonist while the specifics were still being created, Concept Zero had relentlessly fast-paced gameplay with a spirit energy system. It's predicted that the spirit system would allow for stronger attacks and tougher armor, but this concept was dropped for the final release. This was also where the interviews and enemy Ace Squadron appearances that are in the final game were tested, though we'll focus on these two aspects later in the video. Testing would continue throughout 2005, with this year being the one in which the game was revealed at the 2005 Tokyo Game Show. 2005 had more significance than just being the year Ace Combat Zero was made known to the public, though. This was also the year in which the Xbox 360 was released. What does this have to do with Ace Combat Zero? Part of the reason why Zero's development was described as walking on a tightrope was because the Xbox 360 exclusive Ace Combat 6 Fires of Liberation was being developed at the same time, which meant that Project Aces was not only split literally with the team splitting work between 0 and 6, but also ideologically. 0 being the final send-off game for the PlayStation 2 and the 6th generation of consoles at large, and 6 being the transition to the new and shiny, at the time, 7th generation of consoles with increased capabilities that would allow the Ace Combat franchise to reach new heights. So, if there was a mistake or roadblock during the development of 0, there wouldn't be as many people to help work on a solution, which also meant that when it came to ambition, Project Aces couldn't afford to go too crazy with ideas. Speaking on this matter not just as a video game player, but as someone with experience making video games himself, I can confirm that the more ambitious the idea, the more of a pain it usually is to make/implement. This could be why some people describe Ace Combat Zero as a DLC or expansion of Ace Combat 5, and it's understandable where that argument comes from. Both games use the same engine and play very similarly aside from slight gameplay changes here and there. However, Zero still has passion and talent, and the gameplay changes introduced here are significant enough to make this game unique among the other entries. A title that is worthy of being a final send-off to the holy trinity of Ace Combat games, Ace Combat Zero made it through development unscathed. And luckily so as well, given the development team split and the time constraints of getting this game out the door. Plus, I think it's worth mentioning again, this game would go on to be the final send-off for the PS2 era of this franchise. This was the final opportunity for Project Aces to apply everything they knew about the PS2 and its hardware and push it all to its absolute limit. That being said, remaining on the note of consoles and console generations for a bit longer, this is also what probably contributed to the lower sales of Ace Combat Zero. Again, the Xbox 360 was out in full force, providing Red Ring of Death's, next generation gaming experiences that hadn't been seen and experienced before. And the PlayStation 3 would go on to release only a few months after Zero. In the PS3's case, not only was there the promise of next generation gaming experiences, but also a promise of backwards compatibility, meaning if someone was looking to buy Ace Combat Zero or whatever other PS2 titles they may be looking at, but they're also saving up for that PS3, it would make perfect sense for them to hold off on making that purchase until that next-gen console came around. Even more so if someone didn't have a PlayStation 2 beforehand. Which, to be fair, given how massively successful the PS2 was, those instances are more rare, but I'm willing to bet there were people in that exact spot. And then the whole shebang happened with the original cost of the PS3 and how some models were backwards compatible and others weren't, and then perhaps some people even forgot about the PS2 games they wanted to play on their PS3 in favor of newer games coming out. Whatever the reason may be for Zero's lower sales, that doesn't diminish the impact that this game had upon its release. An impact that is still felt and talked about to this day. As I mentioned in the introduction, by now the Ace Combat series had truly figured out its core gameplay loop. Place a player in a sandbox environment with their plane and special weapon of choice, and let them demolish any enemies who dare to cross their path. At this point, it was about seeing how that core gameplay could be improved upon or otherwise changed to make the game be unique, while also making sure it wasn't too drastic of a change. Out of the 3 Holy Trinity games, 0 has my personal favorite gameplay. Between the buttery smooth feeling of flying the aircraft itself, mechanics like how your wingman operates and the enemy aces, the freedom of being able to pick whatever plane and special weapon as well into battle, looking at you 5, it's all here. Ace Combat 0, like the games that came before it, is very accessible for anyone to pick up and play. Granted, there is no tutorial mode here, most likely due to the very tight development timeline the game was on, and you still need to know some fundamentals of flying a plane and aerial warfare, but it's not a flight sim either. You can use your afterburners all you want. You've got an ungodly amount of ordnance for your plane. You don't need to worry about snapping the wings off your own plane with insane speeds. You don't need to worry about Cypher blacking out or turning into jelly from G-forces, none of that. As other people have described the Ace Combat series, this is essentially a video game series based on how we imagine aerial warfare in our minds. As is the norm of the series by this point, the game has you watching a briefing, followed up by you picking your plane and special weapon, and then heading out for the mission at hand. Beginning with the plane selection, Ace Combat 0 has a total of 36 flyable aircraft, a reduction from Ace Combat 5's monstrous 53 flyable aircraft, but still a plentiful number. Rather than the tech tree aircraft family hybrid system that 5 used, 0 opts for a more traditional progression system of unlocking aircraft as you complete missions and achieve specific unlock conditions for the higher tier aircraft. And this time around, when those aircraft are bought, special weapons can be bought again as well. Something I mentioned in my Ace Combat 5 retrospective was that I did find it a negative for there to be only one special weapon per aircraft in that game. 0 fixes that problem, allowing aircraft to become more versatile once again rather than having their flexibility limited. Once you pick your plane and special weapon, you also get to pick the special weapon of your wingman. You don't get to choose the aircraft for your wingman this time around, Pixie and later PJ being locked to their F-15C and F-16C respectively, but you still have some flexibility on how you want them to tackle a mission in the weaponry department. After that, you take to the skies, where the buttery smooth gameplay commences and the additions to it make themselves known. Firstly, Ace Combat 0 allows you to decide on what kind of pilot you are, a mercenary, soldier, or knight. Mercenary means that you lay waste to the land, from a combat-capable enemy to a house that could be storing enemy supplies or troops, to a wounded enemy trying to escape your wrath, they're all as good as dead. You don't care about the chivalry and honor of war. You're here to make the battlefield a living hell for those who are against you. Entirely focused on yourself, paying no attention to your allies in their troubles, you are dead set on making everything that you touch burn. Soldier means that you're able to read the tide of battle, able to make calculated decisions based on which targets are worth going after and which ones are worth sparing. If destroying a target is something you deem crucial to the success of the mission, then you'll go after it. If not, then your priorities will be placed elsewhere. Knight means that you are chivalrous and honorable in war, only going after enemies that are combat capable. You don't even think about touching non-hostile targets. Any enemy pilots who are flying their damaged aircrafts out of the combat zone aren't worth going after. They've already put up their fair fight in the skies, and to engage them in a fight that isn't fair and equal to the both of you would be akin to sacrilege. These different Ace styles are determined by these yellow targets, labeled as non-hostile. Either they'll already be non-hostile targets when the mission begins, or they'll become non-hostile ones in the form of you damaging but not destroying enemy planes. The in-game cutscenes between missions and enemy Ace squadrons you face, which we'll get to those in a bit, change depending on which Ace style you have. I think it's a neat idea, allowing you to be your own Ace pilot, to leave your own legacy in the Belkan War. However, even I, someone who will defend Ace Combat 0 to the death, have to admit that the Ace style gauge is undercooked. The reason being, there are no meaningful incentives to pursue the soldier or knight styles. You know those non-hostile targets I talked about just now? You get full credits for destroying those. And if you're in a situation where you're either starting a new save or grinding missions to unlock the remaining aircraft and special weapons for that 100% completion, you're going to want to have as much money as possible. So why wouldn't you stick with Mercenary by default? Aside from medals in the different enemy Ace squadron fights, there's no moment-to-moment gameplay incentive. There needed to be an equivalent to the bonus of earning more money by going down the Mercenary path. Maybe, for example, you get better intel in some way by going down the soldier path, reflecting the aspect of being a pilot able to read the tide of battle and make calculated decisions on what to do, be it more info during a mission briefing or having an earlier heads up about a mission update, for example, something like that. For the night path, maybe certain fights become easier as a result of enemy pilots giving you the same respect. Not from them fighting any less hard, but from them recognizing your chivalry and honor from previous battles. Maybe if you get to super low health, like 90% damage or higher, the enemy backs off and lets you flee. Just as you let damaged planes go as a knight, it's time for the enemy to show you the same respect. Of course, that wouldn't be entirely fair since on the easier difficulties you can get your health back while the enemy can't, but something along those lines, if not that specifically. In all fairness, I would like to think that if Project Aces had more staff and time, they could have expanded this concept even more. The one part of this system that excels regardless of whatever ace style you're on at any moment though are the encounters with the enemy ace squadrons.
Round 1 to all craft. Time to hunt some wild dogs. Down them all. Roger. Golf team, we cannot authorize a retreat. Intercept them. I figured you'd say that. This is gonna cost you extra. Mercenary dogs. This is a real table. Dead man's words hold no meaning.
Ace Combat is no stranger to enemy aces and ace squadrons. Zoe in Ace Combat 2, Disian in 3, Yellow Squadron in 4, Avnir and Grabak in 5, etc. Zero, however, kicks things up a notch by not only including more enemy ace squadrons for you to fight, but also including different noticeable fighting styles. In the previous games, even if the enemy aces did use tactics that normal enemies wouldn't, such as Yellow Squadron using post-stall maneuvers like the Cobra for instance, their overall fighting styles felt more or less the same. Here in Zero, though, a lot of the boss fights are unique in some way. Gelb 1 and 2 with their backwards firing missiles, Schnee Squadron plus Sorcerer Squadron with their long range attacks, Wizard Squadron with their attempts to ambush you with stealth aircraft while you're busy with the non-stealth aircraft. The introduction of this gameplay mechanic is amazing. At first it's just a simple recon mission at Area B7R with some light aerial combat against standard enemies. Then when you get to the point in which the enemy squadron spawns in, it plays their cutscene. Just from there being a cutscene to begin with, you can tell that these guys mean business. And then the gameplay resumes and the music kicks in. Contact is the perfect musical score for this moment. Not only are you still stuck in low tier aircraft if you're on a new save, but because the enemy ace pilots are flying higher tier aircraft along with having more advanced AI due to them being, well, aces, that matches perfectly with the intensity that Contact brings. Along with the enemy ace squadron boss fights, there are also individual aces that can be shot down for extra credits and to acquire different skins for aircraft. How many are in Zero? As a quick recap, there are a total of 18 non-boss aces in 4 and 16 non-boss aces in 5. Excluding the enemy ace squadrons and their individual members, there are 109 non-boss aces in Zero. All of them can be found in the Assault Records, a collection of all the enemy aces in the game. The non-boss aces have a wide range of different conditions in which they could potentially show up in. Difficulty and ace style are the two factors that usually determine which aces get spawned in. These non-boss aces usually have a middle ground between the AI of normal enemies and the AI of the ace squadrons. A great way to show that these pilots are still a cut above the rest, but not quite at the level of the bosses of the game. You don't have to face them alone though, as no matter what, you will always have either Pixie or PJ with you. This leads me into talking about the Wingman command system. This system is essentially the same as it was in 5 aside from a few differences. Firstly, you're only commanding a single wingman instead of 3 of them. Secondly, you have the ability to specify whether your wingman should go after only air or ground targets when you tell them to disperse. Other than those small changes, the wingman command system is the same. Up on the D-pad to have your wingman attack any enemies at your 12, right on the D-pad to enable or disable the use of your wingman's special weapon, down on the D-pad to tell your wingman to cover you, and left on the D-pad to let your wingman loose for them to pursue their own targets. Pixie and PJ are among the best wingmen in the Ace Combat series due to them being able to deal their fair share of damage and then some. While you'll still be doing most of the work by far, playing into the aspect aspect of you being the reason the Belkan War plays out the way it does, Pixie and PJ are able to have their time in the spotlight too. While your wingmen in 5 had solid AI and could hold their own in combat, they aren't on the level of Pixie and PJ in 0. And while I do wish there was a way for you to be able to pick your wingman's aircraft here as well, I understand why that isn't the case. Even though you as Cypher are Golem 1, both Pixie and PJ are mercenaries too, and thus in charge of their own planes, even if they're your subordinates as Golem 2. Another aspect of 0 that I think is awesome are the boss fights outside of the enemy Ace Squadron sprinkled in, namely Excalibur and the XBO. Focusing on Excalibur first, I love this thing. One of the most underrated super weapons in Ace combat. A chemical laser system originally built for ballistic missile defense, the Belkans managed to turn this thing into a long-range support fire weapon. Excalibur fires its laser into the air, the laser is then reflected off of a satellite and reduced to the ground, where anyone caught in the line of fire is vaporized. I will admit that Excalibur's first appearance can be a little annoying with how little reaction time you get, but it's easy, if a little time consuming, to cheese it once you know how it works. The actual boss fight itself though, I love. This mission has such a brilliant mix of tension and relief. Tension from the sounds of all that electricity building and then Pixie telling you to get out of the line of fire, all while you've got full afterburners going as you're telling yourself, I got this, I got this, I got this.
Give me a look at Cypher's middle. Today I'll be getting one just as shiny.
And then relief for every strike that you evade. Then you start striking at Excalibur itself when you close the gap when the tables have turned, and you can't help but to smirk as feelings of confidence start to course through your veins. Target. We can even see it from here. Good job. Yes! We did it! The sword has been pulled from the stone. It was Lucio's flight lead who did it. Right on! Now that's what I call teamwork. Cypher, you hear that warm welcome? It's the sweet sound of victory. Not bad for a group of misfits, huh? Well done! All planes, job well done. PJ, don't get too excited and crash, buddy. Yeah! The other boss fight I want to highlight is against the XBO, the experimental bomber, hence the XB in its name, otherwise known as Hresvelgr, a gigantic beast of an aerial battleship capable of laying waste to targets down below thanks to its bombing capability. If there's one thing that you should know about me, I love a good fight against an aerial battleship. There's a reason why I love missions like Heavy Command Cruiser from Ace Combat 6 and Standoff in the Skies in X. And Zero's fight with Talon of Ruin is one such mission. What's neat about the XBO is in how it fights. This thing is essentially a glorified bomber and aircraft carrier. Supposedly. Compared to the higher tech aerial battleships that we see in other games like the Gleipnir in X, the Aigion in 6, and the Arsenal Bird in 7, for example, the XBO feels very first of its kind, if that makes any sense. Not in a literal sense for the series, as the very first aerial battleship boss fight in the series can be found in the final mission of Air Combat, also known as Ace Combat in Japan, but rather the first of its kind in a timeline sense. You've got the comms chatter from both sides playing as the crew of the XBO does their best to fight against you as you chip away at this aerial battleship target by target, then the music kicks in as you, the Demon Lord, work your magic, all leading up to the beast being slain as it crashes into the Vuldrike Mountains.
Special weapons are almost gone. What's happening with damage control? XBO will be out of combat airspace in 10 miles. It's your last chance. Cypher's unstoppable. He's gonna destroy everything in sight. XBO has been stripped of all defenses. Take her out, Comm Team.
The XBO's taking a death blow. It was Cypher. Cypher did it.
For the last couple of minutes of the gameplay section, I want to highlight some of my favorite missions. Excalibur and Talon of Ruin are among the list if you couldn't already tell, but one of my other favorite missions is Mayhem.
Time to dive into the fireworks.
Ace Combat and large-scale furballs go hand in hand. This style of mission really showed itself first with Ace Combat 3. Missions like Damage Control in the UPO path and Betrayal in the General Resource path. Then it was improved upon in Ace Combat 4 with Shattered Skies. There wasn't a huge furball kind of mission in 5, but that makes a grand return here in 0. Once more returning to Area B7R, the Allied and Belkan Air Forces are locked into a full-blown engagement. Whichever side is destroyed or retreats first will be on the defensive moving forward. This mission shows off just how much the Ace Combat series has improved up to this point. The buttery smooth gameplay, the AI of the enemies in Pixie, the music kicking in combining with the comms chatter to play into the staple of you as the protagonist being the backbone of your nations, or clients in this case military, it's all here.
Commander's plane is on. Follow chain of command. Attacking without mercy. They plan on trying everything.
No mercenary. Damn him. He's turning the tide of battle in their favor.
This can't be human.
It's like a demon.
I've never seen anything like it.
That kind of violence, they call a demon lord.
This mission is also quite challenging, especially if you're going after all of the possible aces as well. You need to make sure you keep your ammo in check, you need to make sure you position yourself well to go after enemies, but also give yourself room to break if a missile gets sent your way. The perfect mix of putting your piloting skills to the test, smooth gameplay, and awesome music all come together to make Mayhem one of my absolute favorite missions, not just in 0, but in all of Ace Combat. Another favorite mission of mine is the Inferno, but I'll save that deep dive for later because that has major story ramifications rather than anything gameplay related. Demon of the Round Table is another favorite of mine because it's a great skill check for the game. A chance for you to really show your skills as the mission is oops, all aces. This mission also has some more story elements that I'll go into later. And lastly, 0, the perfect 1v1 duel to wrap the game up. While we're still in the gameplay section, I actually want to take a look at one more thing before we move on. I want to take a bit of time to really highlight the game's music. Composed by various aces of music, specifically Tetsukazu Nakanishi, Keiki Kobayashi, Hiroshi Okubo, and Junichi Nakatsuru, Zero's music has such an awesome mix of tracks for whatever emotion the game wants you to feel. From the graceful introduction to the game, to you fighting against and overcoming great odds against powerful enemies, to you having an absolute blast in the skies as you earn the nickname of Demon Lord of the Round Table, to you getting hit in the face with the horrors of war. To a climactic final boss that's the culmination of everything the game has offered. The music wouldn't have any context to it without a good story though, right? Alright, enough of me teasing about it. I've mentioned it plenty of times now. It's about time we take a look at this game's story, and why this one is what I consider to be the best story the Ace Combat series has told. Ace Combat Zero's story is my personal favorite out of the entire franchise. It manages to balance numerous topics that all combine together to make this game be about more than just selecting a plane and laying waste to the enemies on the battlefield. Zero lets you as the player have your moments of being on top of the world. Zero tackles real-world issues and why people may fight. Zero also isn't afraid to once again show the dark sides of war, to show that it's the farthest thing from black and white. Ace Combat Zero's story begins through the eyes of Brett Thompson, a journalist who is making a documentary titled Warriors and the Belkan War. Warriors and the Belkan War is about the, well, Belkan War, told through the perspective of various Ace pilots who took part in the conflict. Going into this, Brett was just looking to make a general documentary about it, but as he was doing research and looking through recently declassified documents about the conflict, he found multiple mentions of a pilot who went by the code word of Demon. After seeing these similarities, Brett changes course on the direction of his documentary, deciding to have it be through the perspective of this pilot, or as much of a perspective from this pilot as he can form, as according to him in the intro, it's questionable if he even existed. This could all just be a battlefield legend for all he knew, which is why not only does Brett pursue more knowledge about the Belkan War, but he also pursues more knowledge about the Demon Lord himself through various other people he meets along his journey. After the introductory cutscene, the story takes a back seat for a decent chunk of the campaign. When I first began playing this game, years ago at this point, I found it a little odd for there to be such a big chunk of time between gameplay and the next big story section. But nowadays, having taken a deeper look at it, I think the reason why there's this gap is for us to give context to Brett's decision. Through the missions we play, we start to gain recognition from both allies and enemies. Because of the battles we win, the enemies we shoot down, how we're able to turn the tide of war through pushing the Belkans back, we play out the very actions that cause the documentary to be through Cypher, and by extension, all of the enemy Ace pilots we meet along the way. This answers the question, why should we care about Cypher? Why did Brett Thompson decide to, in his words, pursue the Belkan War through him? The missions we play and the feats we accomplish give context as to why Brett gets so invested with Cypher's accomplishments in battle that he completely forgets about the documentary itself for a while. Taking a look at some of those missions, once you begin fighting your first enemy Ace squadron during mission 3, the Round Table, the theme of having a reason to fight makes itself known. Rot Squadron calls us wild dogs.
Drop one to all craft. Time to hunt some wild dogs. Down them all. Roger. That's all they are. Nothing like us.
Groon Squadron tells us that we made the wrong choice.
Looks like you mercenaries make the wrong choice.
Indigo Squadron says that unlike us, they fight for a real cause.
Like you mercenaries, I fight for a real cause. The ones who survive are those who fight for their convictions.
From this point moving forward, that theme looms over us throughout the rest of our playtime, and it's a theme that applies really well with any mercenary characters like Cypher and Pixie. Mercenaries only care about that paycheck most of the time. More often than not, they could care less about who the client is. Because of that, whenever this theme of finding a true reason to fight is repeated and we hear bits and pieces of Pixie commenting on that theme, it's a little surprising. At first, during the encounter with either Rot, Grun, or Indigo Squadron, Pixie tells AWACS Eagle Eye that it's going to cost the Allied forces extra to have them shot down, perfectly lining up with him being a mercenary.
Golf team, we cannot authorize a retreat. Intercept them. I figured you'd say that. This is gonna cost you extra.
The first change in Pixie's tone comes in Diapason. When Pixie tells us that everyone down in Directus, the capital of Ustio, has a reason to fight after it's been liberated, it almost sounds like Pixie is a little jealous, like he's starting to get tired or otherwise fed up with fighting just for the sake of money.
We lost. Belkan Army. We've been defeated. We got our city back. They've got a reason to fight. This battle's over.
This is reinforced during Mayhem, when one of the Allied Forces pilots, Wizard 1, talks to Pixie, calling him out by name over comms and telling him it's about time we got out of this dead-end job.
Wizard 1 here. The enemy has broken formation. Take him out. Larry, can you read me? Looks like you still got the touch. It's happening just as you thought. It's about time we got out of this dead-end job. Not just yet.
At first, it may seem like Wizard 1 is a fellow mercenary, the dead-end job part of this line potentially referring to the fact that the war is going to end in the Allied forces' favor soon, so they should move on to something else in order to keep making money. But listening to this line again, along with the fact that Wizard 1 and the rest of his team aren't mercenaries, being a part of the Ocean Air Force, I think this is Wizard 1's way of saying to Pixie it's almost time for a world with no boundaries to make itself known. Pixie's reply of "not just yet" is him telling Wizard 1 now's not the right time, not while the war is still actively going on at least. Then we get to the Inferno. The Inferno takes place in the Belkan city of Hoffnung. The Allied forces have identified this city as a crucial part to Belka's wartime production. In order to end the war faster, we're sent on a mission to keep Allied bombers safe while they perform bombing runs against these factories. Sounds like a simple enough precision bombing mission, except when we get there, it's a massacre. The Inferno is not just the scariest mission in Ace Combat Zero, but I would argue it's one of the scariest missions in the entire franchise. Something that I've been intentionally waiting to bring up until now, the Belkan War takes inspiration from World War II, Belka being Germany, the Allied forces being the Allies, things like that. One such inspiration from World War II comes from the firebombing of Dresden. From February 13th to the 15th, 1945, US and British bombers dropped explosive and incendiary ordnance onto Dresden, burning it all to the ground with intense firestorms raging throughout the city. The goal was to reduce civilian and soldier morale to bring an end to the war in Europe as quickly as possible. The death toll varies from source to source, with claims ranging from 40,000 to 100,000 plus. This mission in Zero reflects this devastating damage. The fires that rage on down below give sources of light to the darkness that the mission takes place in. You can hear how panicked the Belkan soldiers and civilians are down below. You can hear the booms of the bombs making impact as the bombers initiate their run. All of that ordnance dropped onto Hoffnung creates firestorms as they rage on, sucking up all of the air around them. With every bomb dropped, from the bombers and potentially from you as well, depending on how you approach this mission, those firestorms grow more and more intense. Belkans who are ordered to set fire to buildings on their way out to prevent the Allied forces from capturing intel and equipment add to the temperature and firestorms. Because the firestorms are sucking up all of the air around them, the soldiers and civilians down below are left to suffocate. The temperature all around Hoffnung continues to rise, the city becoming a giant oven as people begin to see and feel their skin bubble and peel off as they're cooked alive. Some of them even spontaneously combust due to the high temperature, as the flames continue to burn bright. As the oven that has become Hoffnung continues to grow more and more hot, a Belkan soldier reads an order from headquarters telling them to abandon the city. An order that isn't out of the ordinary given the circumstances, but one that becomes all the more chilling once you know what Hoffnung means in German.
This is PJ. Something strange is going on down there. The number of burning areas just suddenly increased.
All units. This is an order from Operation HQ. Abandon Hoffnung. Pelicans are setting fire to their oven. A boss is I can see. So this is the price we pay for losing. Even the Hoffnung is what has become of our Mayhem. The flames are spreading. Belkan City's gonna burn to the ground. Hoffnung has fallen to the Allied forces.
The city's going up in flames!
Learn to accept it, kid. This is war.
You expect me to believe that arson and indiscriminate bombing is war?
There's no mercy in war. It's a collision of powers.
Even war has a set of rules to follow.
Mission objective fulfilled. All units, return to base. Damn them all.
Nobody knew why they were fighting anymore. All I felt at that point was sadness for the world. That's why I...
Pixie being rocked to his core is made even more powerful when you remember that he's a mercenary. Mercenaries don't ever care about the reasons for a fight. They don't ever get emotionally invested for a cause. Their whole reason to fight is for money and nothing more. So for Pixie to be questioning orders, to be asking about the mission, to forget about the money and instead focus on the fighting, speaks volumes. And if you dive into some of the cut content of the game, you can hear some unused voice lines from Pixie in this mission. And, well...
Who are they fighting for? What have we done? This is AWACS. Our mission. Our mission. Our job. Our mission. Is this what our mission is? What is our mission? GOM 2, keep your head in the battle. PJ, what is our mission?
Pixie, what are you...
I don't know why these lines ended up being cut, because these can be tough to listen to, as they should be. Pixie is in a state of distress during the mission in the final build of the game, don't get me wrong, but these unused lines have him almost breaking down entirely. I think that these lines should have remained in the final version of the game, as it would have really driven home the point of a mercenary being so moved by what's happening around him that he begins fighting for something greater than monetary gain. And the ending cutscene where he says that nobody even knew why they were fighting anymore, that this war had just devolved into violence for the sake of it, that was the moment. That moment right there was when he decided that there was no saving the world in its current state. Everything has to be reset. The following mission, the Stage of Apocalypse, tasks us with mopping up remaining Belkan forces. This mission should put an end to the war. We notice that Pixie is still thinking about the previous mission, still clearly shaken up by the events that played out, and we hear him say something rather concerning.
This war would end if they blew everything up.
On our way to the remaining Belkan forces, though, we get a crucial mission update.
Emergency transmission from Allied HQ. A Belkan bomber squadron equipped with nuclear weapons has taken off for Ostio.
What?
Enemy bombers are approaching this airspace. GOM team, crew team, head to intercept.
This mission, we see the Belkan forces are in absolute chaos. We see Belkan pilots engaging one another, MiG-31s that show up as non-hostile targets going after not us, but the bombers. The music in full force as the urgency and desperation to prevent these bombers from making it with their payload grows more and more intense.
Warning. Change course immediately. Return to base or you'll get shot down.
The enemy's attacking each other?
Eliminate anyone who attempts to interfere. They're no longer our allies. Don't hesitate to shoot them down. Don't worry about that now. Just concentrate on shooting down those bombers.
This is perfect. Let's use it against them.
We managed to destroy all the bombers just in time, but after that...
All planes confirmed down. We did it!
There's no impossible jobs for us mercenaries. Freedom and we, Falcons.
What the?
Our buddy, our wingman that has had our back since the beginning of the game, suddenly turns on us. We take evasive action, pleading with Pixie to cease fire. Surely this has to be some kind of misunderstanding. Eventually, Pixie breaks off from attacking us, heading out of the combat zone following Wizard 1 for reasons we don't know yet. After mopping up a few more enemies, we're given a few seconds to take in the shocking turn of events that have happened. Belka detonated 7 nuclear devices on their own soil in order to halt the Allied forces' advance. And it worked. With the Allied forces thrown into disarray from this move, both them and Belka quickly pursued a ceasefire. On June 20th, 1995, the Belkan War officially came to an end. Nothing up to this point in terms of twists and surprises in missions come close to this moment in Zero. The only thing that I can think of that even comes close to this moment is the twist of Dician being a sublimated copy of himself rather than a flesh and blood human being towards the end of 3. Even then though, that twist is conveyed purely through story cutscenes. Here in Zero, we are actively playing the game, actively being a witness to the 7 nukes going off. Even though the Belkan War has officially ended now, not everyone is done fighting. There's a considerable remnant force left, and it's up to us to wipe them out. It's at this point PJ becomes our wingman for the rest of the game. I have no doubt in my mind that Cypher is distraught from Pixie not only leaving him, but also nearly killing him. And with how naive to war PJ seems to be, coupled with the fact that he's not as skilled of a pilot as Pixie, essentially having to babysit his wingman no doubt makes Cypher aggravated. And with some people finding PJ a bit annoying in-game, I think that's intentional on the part of the developers to match Cypher's annoyance in-game. Regardless, the next couple of missions involve us cleaning up the remnant forces, though at the end of the final overture, PJ comments that there are too many to simply be remnant forces.
This is no remnant resistance. This war's not over yet.
But those remnant forces don't show their faces again for half a year. 6 months pass with nothing going on. The world returns to a semblance of normalcy during this time. Did the remnant forces give up? Was that all of them in the final overture? No. In fact, those enemies fighting us weren't really remnant forces. They weren't fighting in defiance of the Belkan War ending. They were fighting for something else entirely. It was just a matter of buying time for themselves so that when the time was right, they could carry out their plan.
The top officers in the Belkan army have pulled a coup d'etat. Calling their organization a world with no boundaries, the forces bombed the city of Lumen, where the cessation of hostilities treaty was signed, using a giant gunship codenamed XBO. Your mission is to pursue the XBO and... Wait. We've just received an emergency transmission from the control tower. Unidentified aircraft are approaching our base. Scramble all planes. Quick, there's no time. Get into the air immediately.
At first, we're in the dark as to what the goal of A World with No Boundaries is. All we know is that they're up to no good, judging from them bombing the city of Lumen and Valet airbase with the XBO. Whatever this faction is up to, taking out this massive aerial battleship will deal a significant blow to them. After striking down the XBO and discovering their intentions to launch a V2 in order to nuke the world, we take off to the faction's headquarters at Avalon Dam. At this point, we're still puzzled as to what they could be fighting for. Is this really just the renegade army from Belka still holding a grudge all these months later? No, that can't be. This army is composed of Belkans, yeah, but soldiers from Osea, Yuktobania, Sapin, and Ustio are reported to be in this army as well. So what could they be possibly fighting for? In the following mission, the Demon of the Round Table, we get that answer. No matter which squadron we face depending on our A style, be it Sorcerer, Gald, or Wizard Squadron, they all give the same reason.
There's no meaning in the round table anymore. What are you fighting for?
The battle to realign the borders has moved to the meeting boardroom.
Those lines will build a new future.
Those lines will give birth to new conflict.
What do you mean?
I'm a resident of the world with no boundaries, and I will eliminate the false hero.
What are you doing? The war's ended long ago.
A world with no boundaries aligns itself with no country. We are humanity's ideal army. It's time for a perfect world without restrictions or wars. Note 1 to all units. Begin the operation. Let the victor be justice.
What are you doing? The war's ended long ago.
The table is surrounded by politicians who have never placed a foot on the battlefield.
It's a necessary discussion to build a peaceful world.
It's a disgusting squabble on who gets the largest share of the pie, and that's why it needs to end.
What do you mean?
It is for that duty that we raise the king. That's why we're fighting.
What are you fighting for?
This place is no longer a battlefield. The world war is being fought on a small round table in a meeting room.
It's a discussion to decide the beginnings of a new era.
Clashing greed is the cause of all conflict. We will carry out the new creation of destruction through the power of righteousness.
What do you mean?
Territories, peoples, authorities, all will be liberated. This is the new state a world with no boundaries will create. Neither nations nor nationalities have meaning. We will erase these unnecessary borders. The world will change.
Out of every single coup d'etat/rebel faction in the Ace Combat series, A World with No Boundaries is my personal favorite without question for this very reason. A World with No Boundaries highlights some very real problems regarding war, how those at the top have no idea what it means to fight, how clashing greed and people willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want, even if it means screwing over others, causes undue suffering, how the world in its current state feels hopeless unless we begin from a clean slate. We've seen the bloodshed that humanity is capable of throughout this war, with the bombing of Hoffnung being the tipping point. Not only were the Belkans abandoning the City of Hope when the order to abandon Hoffnung was given, but those in A World with No Boundaries abandoned hope of this world being saved as well. And it's hard to blame them. Not only would a reset of the world as we know it mean that we wouldn't have any more wars, but other problems would be taken care of as well. Although A World with No Boundaries' main reason for fighting is to prevent future wars from happening, by resetting the world, other aspects can be fixed as well. No longer would people need to sell their soul away to a company for 40 hours a week just to make ends meet. No longer would people need to worry about things like medical debt and only receiving treatment if they have enough money to pay for it. People wouldn't be seen as numbers on a spreadsheet that can be added or subtracted depending on the needs of the business or the needs of the world as a whole. The world won't be stuck with old leaders who are so focused on the past that they halt progress and restrict freedoms because of that. So much would be fixed if we wiped the slate clean. No more of this peaceful, polite asking for change to be done. Words can only get get you so far when we all know that actions speak louder? Yeah, millions will die in these nuclear fires, and it's a damn shame they won't be alive to experience the new world order, but if it's for the good of the world, then it's worth it. Those who have the conviction to go through with launching the V2 and setting the world on its new path will carry a burden that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Espada Team, Sorcerer Squadron, Gult Squadron, Wizard Squadron, the remnant Belkan forces who bought a world with no boundaries the time needed to prepare for this moment, every single anti-air crew member, pilot, air crew member for the XBO, and everyone else willing to do what needs to be done. They're all tired of sitting around and hoping that the world will change. They recognize that in order to make meaningful progress to the world becoming better, sacrifices need to be made. They're willing to scorch their family, friends, and the whole world as they know it in a nuclear flame so that future generations won't have to suffer through all the bullshit that's currently become normalized. Normalized all because ink on pieces of paper from people either too focused on the past or too focused on their self-interests says that this or that should or shouldn't happen. A world with no boundaries is here to pen the new story of humanity, to have humanity advance to the next chapter, one full of prosperity and peace. But when you take a look at the big picture, when you give your mind time to cool down after fantasizing about a world with no wars and none of the other problems that we face today, scorching the earth isn't the way to go about solving all of that. Yeah, actions speak louder than words, and at this point, writing and petitioning isn't going to get much in the way of results. But we don't need to end the lives of millions in order to make that progress. That, and for as noble as a world with no boundaries' goal is to have the world become a utopia, free of any conflict, humans are always going to have a problem with one another. There will always be a disagreement, no matter how big or small, that people are willing to kill each other over. And as long as that sentence remains true, it doesn't matter if we reset the world as we know it. Eventually, history will repeat itself, and we'll be right back at square one in due time. And so, that's why we fight back. We wipe out Sorcerer, Gult, or Wizard Squadron at Area B7R before booking it to Avalon Dam. Everything about this mission is excellent. The canyon run is the highlight for me. You've got allies flying all around, getting shot down as they're drawing the anti-air fire so you have a chance to break through. The desperation in the voices of your allies as the number of friendly aircraft in the canyon decreases one by one. The music, especially when the horns kick in. I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this point, but it's all amazing. Then when you break through to the other side, the music switches to something more hopeful yet urgent.
Get to the enemy fortress. Once you're close, increase altitude and fly over the dam.
This is PJ. If I'm with you, I know I can do it. I'll follow your lead.
You passed the first bridge.
Calm down. Y'all isn't the only team that can fight. Our guys above are taking the heat. Don't let them down.
You passed the second bridge.
My left wing's hit. Sorry. Service 4 pulling out. Joker 1's down. 10 planes left. Joker 4 disengaged. 9 planes left.
You passed the third bridge.
Use no true, hang in there. It won't be long until Golf Team takes out the V2. Domino 2 is down. 7 planes left. Joker 2 also went down. 6 planes left. Damn, Finish 2's been hit too. 5 planes left. 2 planes are through. Who made it through? Gone? All planes, tell the attack above. Golf Team will handle the V2. We're gonna stop it no matter what. I never want to see that man land again.
You have a chance to stop the end of the world as you know it, but time is not on your side. While you're given a generous amount of time on the easier difficulties, on the harder ones you don't have much of it to spare. Especially if you're aiming to take out all the aces and other threats in the area before diving through the tunnels in order to take out the V2 launch control modules. Ace Combat is no stranger to you as a fighter pilot performing a tunnel run. And in Zero, not only do you have a tunnel run, but multiple of them as you have to go back in and mop up the remaining locks and control modules you didn't manage to get on your first pass. All while the timer ticks down. All while the battle above the tunnels continues to rage on. A world with no boundaries has nothing to lose at this point, which means they'll throw anything and anyone against you. But nothing can stop you, the Demon Lord of the Round Table, from unleashing your wrath to save the world.
Go into sequence 6. We can make it. All V2 control facilities have been destroyed.
We did it! We stopped the
in yet? Buddy.
There he is, outfitted in the 4.5th generation ADFX-02 Morgan, having finally found his reason to fight. After fighting purely for the sake of money, not just in the Belkan War, but in previous conflicts leading up to this one, Pixie takes to the skies, not for the sake of the bottom line, but for a cause. A cause that may have driven him to betray Cypher. A cause that may have driven him to be willing to commit genocide on a global scale for the sake of a new world order, but a cause nonetheless. After putting up with the horrors of war for so long, and after the tipping point that was the bombing of Hoffnung, he came to the conclusion that the world in its current state was beyond saving. We now get to experience what it's like to be fighting against Pixie. The skill and efficiency of our wingman that was a great asset to us earlier in the campaign is now coming back to bite us. Pixie slashes the sky with the Morgan's tactical laser system as he tries to slice us apart like he did with PJ. Enough damage is eventually dealt that the laser system falls off, where Pixie decides to use multi-purpose burst missiles against us next. As he scorches the sky in flame, he asks us, what has Borders given us? He tells us that it's time to start over from scratch. And although we can see where he and the rest of A World With No Boundaries is coming from, it's not their place to end the lives of so many for their goal. Once we deal enough damage to stop the MPBMs, to our horror, the V2 takes flight. This is the culmination of everything we have seen and experienced up to this point. From our first sortie defending Valais Air Base from what Belka anticipated would be the final knockout punch for Ustio, to the final sortie here at Avalon. A game that has allowed us to be an ace pilot of the skies, turning the tide of battle as we've more than earned our nickname of Demon Lord. A game that isn't afraid to entertain the idea of resetting everything to zero and all the benefits that would bring, but also acknowledging that it's not our place to end the lives of so many in order to achieve that goal. And so, we enter the final stage of our fight with Pixie, our wingman, our friend, our buddy. No longer are we fighting just for the sake of money. We're fighting to save the world as we know it. We found our reason to fight!
You and I are opposite sides of the same coin.
V2 re-entry in 4 minutes.
When we face each other, we can finally see our true selves. There may be a resemblance, but we never face the same direction.
Com 1, go for his front air intake.
Now we find out who's number one.
Fire away, coward. V2 re-entry in 3 minutes.
Looks like we both still got what it takes. Come on!
Mission accomplished, Cypher. Come on, let's go back home. You wouldn't want to keep anyone waiting for you.
After the mission, we get the ending to Brett Thompson's documentary. In the first half of the interviews that are sprinkled throughout the game, each of the pilots recall their experiences up in the skies along with their fateful encounter with Cypher. The second half of each interview has each pilot telling us how that encounter changed them and the impact that Cypher has left on them. It's through these interviews that Brett is able to give an answer to the question he asked at the beginning of the game. Was Cypher real? Yes, he was. And when we get to the final interview of the game, the conclusion of Brett's interview with Pixie, we can't help but to feel happy that Pixie is alive. Although in the heat of the moment, he was a traitor who backstabbed us to set the world on fire, at least for me, I can understand why. Everyone has their limits, and given how much of a wreck the world can be at times, I can't blame Pixie one bit for wanting to do something about it. Hell, had it not been for the whole global genocide part of the plan with the V2, I'd be willing to hear A World With No Boundaries out more. But I get why A World With No Boundaries was willing to go to that extreme. Years upon years upon years of conflict and all these other problems that could be solved if people weren't so greedy, if they lived and let lived. And we all know the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over expecting different results. Change is needed, but this isn't the way to go about it. And it seems like Pixie learned that lesson himself in due time, as he asks if getting rid of borders would even change anything. Knowing human behavior, getting rid of borders would only be a temporary solution. Pixie also drops a very real line when he says that the world won't change for the better unless we trust people, and how true peace will never happen because trust is a required part of that.
The world won't change for the better unless we trust people. Trust is vital in a peaceful world. But that will never happen.
That line also hits close to me personally. I'd be part of the reason we can't ever have a utopia because damn, these trust issues have hands. As long as people have a reason to justify being suspicious or unsure about others, that trust won't ever be there. How an arcade flight action game is able to tell such a great story and leave such a lasting impression like this should be a testament to how well written this game is. And with those last words from Pixie that are directed at us, the game concludes.
Will he see this video? If you do meet him, give him a message for me. Yo, buddy. Still alive? And thanks, friend. See you again.
The game may have ended, but this retrospective hasn't. Not for a little bit longer, at least. After all these years of playing the game, after getting to fight alongside and against Pixie for so long, after not being able to reply to his message all this time, I think I'm finally ready to do so. Not because I was worried about anything, but because I needed more time. More time to not only get to where I am now, where I've made this retrospective about the game, but also more time to just live. Time that has allowed me to finally be able to have this moment. Hey buddy, I'm still alive. Gosh, where do I even begin? So much has happened since I first saw your message all those years ago. I've graduated high school, I'll hopefully be done with college soon. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life after that, but I'm sure I'll figure it out soon. I'll find my reason to, well, maybe fight. I could become a fighter pilot myself someday. It's something I considered a while back. Though, given how terrible I am with numbers and math, I don't think I'd make for a great pilot, honestly. For the moment though, I guess a better word would be, well, no, fight is actually the best word now that I think about it. A reason to fight, to keep going, to stay alive. I won't get into specifics, but I've come close to losing that fight a few times. Some days are easier than others, but overall, I'm glad I'm still alive. I've been able to experience so many cool things because I've kept up that fight. I finally got my own desktop PC back in August as a birthday gift. I've become an Armored Core fan through Armored Core 6. I'm on my way to hit the 5K sub milestone on YouTube, halfway to my ultimate goal of making it to 10K. I've got a steadily growing Twitch channel as well, and more things that I'll refrain from mentioning so I don't ramble on for too long. Otherwise, this part will go on forever. Needless to say, I found my reasons to fight. Enough about me, though. What about you? Hope you've been well. You seem to be doing well for yourself. You seem to have your reasons to fight, and that's awesome to see. I wanted to also thank you. Thank you for being such an amazing wingman for me to fly alongside, and thank you for being an enemy to face off against at the end. You gave me a sense of camaraderie in the skies, and challenged my reason to fight, both in the game and outside of that. So, have you found a reason to fight yet, buddy? Is a line that I still reflect on every now and then. I think I speak on behalf of not just everyone watching this retrospective, but also the entire Ace Combat fanbase at large when I say that you've had that impact on all of us. Anyway, that's all that I have to say, and I think that's enough. One last thing, though. Yo, buddy. Still alive? And thanks, friend. See you again. Ace Combat Zero: The Belkan War, a game that is the perfect send-off for the Holy Trinity, one that inspires all sorts of emotions from those who play it. Fear, admiration, awe, accomplishment, sadness, shock, you name it, this Ace Combat game probably had someone feel it. As for why Ace Combat Zero is my favorite title out of them all, I think it has to do with the different parts, the elements of an Ace Combat title. Every Ace Combat game has its blending of elements when it comes to gameplay, story, style, and more, but out of all the Ace Combat games out there, for me at least, Zero's combination of its amazing elements produced what is in my eyes the best Ace Combat game in the series. That, perhaps, may be my answer.